Coming up on Theater Talk, you're directing two of the world's greatest actors. How do you handle these guys? I mean, how do you whip them into shape?
Sometimes very delicately, sometimes very sternly.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
This is outrageous. Who are you? What are you doing in my house? Get some? A whiskey and soda.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, I have seen two marvelous plays on Broadway last week.
Two contemporary classics, Harold Pinter's No Man's Land, one of my favorite of the contemporary works, and the absolute classic Samuel Beckett, Waiting for Godot, in terrific productions, directed by fine director Sean Mathias. Welcome back to, have you been on this show before, Sean?
No,
I've never been on the show, no, first time.
Debut at Theater Talk.
Theater Talk Virgin.
And he's got these minor character actors you may have heard of in this play that he's overseen. Patrick Stewart, welcome back to Theater Talk. You were so brilliant in Macbeth a few years ago.
Thank you.
And Ian McKellen, who we've not seen, I haven't seen, I think, since Dance of Death that Sean did several years ago with Helen.
Yes, 2001.
That's right. Well, gentlemen, welcome to Theater Talk.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, Sean, why this pairing? Why No Man's Land and why Waiting for Godot? Is there a link in your mind somewhere that we should be aware of?
It's a tremendous amount of serendipity in a way, because both plays I tried to do over a number of years and failed for whatever reasons. They'd never come together. And after 20 years of trying to do Godot, we finally did it. Ian and Patrick and I did it in London. We did it on a wonderful tour of the UK and then brought it into London. Patrick left it, and subsequently we went on to do it. Ian did it with Roger Rees, and we did it again in London, and we did it in Australia.
You traveled the world with it.
We went to South Africa. We played in a township. We played in a township without the set in Khayelitsha in South Africa, which was an incredible night. Playing to 10-year-old children from a township with Godot was a fantastic experience. Anyway, Patrick then asked me to do No Man's Land with him, and I said, well, that's a play I wanted to do for about 20 years, and I've tried to do that twice before and failed. And he wanted to do it with Ian, but I had asked Ian to do it, and Ian was a little unsure about it. He wasn't convinced by the play. So we did a reading of it, the three of us, with a couple of other actors, and I think we were all fairly seduced into it. And oddly and quite simply, my partner had said to me, you know, if Patrick's very keen to do No Man's Land, but Ian's quite keen to do Godot again, because we hadn't done it in America, why don't they both give in to one another and do both the plays? And I said, well...
And here you are.
Well, you know, that just sounds like a piece of opportunism, but it was opportunism that had made so much sense because of the connections between Beckett and Pinter and the way you can cross-cast the plays.
Absolutely.
And then we all decided, well, you know, these chaps, they don't like to sort of let the grass grow. So a challenge like that, a thrilling possibility of doing repertoire, seemed too good to be true, and so we're here.
Let me ask you guys, when you approached No Man's Land, let me ask you, Patrick, why were you so enthusiastic about this play, and what were your reservations about it, Ian?
I experienced the play for the first time in the theatre, in performance, with John Gielgud and Ralph Richards.
One of the legendary evenings in the theatre.
Yes. And I went back twice more that week and would have gone a fourth time if I could have afforded it. And at one of those occasions, I said to myself, one day, I will be in this play. I didn't even at that time think what I might play. Probably not one of the two leading roles.
No, you were a bit young when you were watching.
Play the thuggish guy who comes in.
Yeah, there was a time I was a natural Briggs. Not maybe as natural as the great Shula Hensley is, but nevertheless. And it's been there on my to-do list for 35 years. And then, when I came to share a dressing room with my friend here for 22 weeks, increasingly I saw not only as I got to know him better and better, but also on stage, that here indeed was the made-to-measure Spooner for No Man's Land. And then, so I simply fell into the other role naturally.
And Ian, you had some reservations about the plays?
Well, I've never had a wish list, but if I had a non-wish list, I think No Man's Land would have been on it. As a wonderfully entertaining play, and like Patrick, I saw the original production, but was so impressed by particularly Gielgud's performance that constantly in rehearsals I've been saying to Sean, is that Gielgud that I've just done? I seem to be able to remember exactly his intonation for so much of the part. I thought, well, if the part's been played perfectly, why do I have to come and trample over the territory? And I thought of the original production, it was an event about acting. Perhaps people might think this about this production of ours, I don't know. But that was the central thing. You were going to see the great knights, and Pinter came in as an added bonus. But am I so pleased that we had that reading, which we laughed. So that was the turning point for me.
Oh, you found the humor?
Uncontrollable laughter, unable to speak the next line because it was so funny. Then I thought, well, why deny myself that pleasure?
Were Richardson and Gielgud funny in the original production, or was it that sense of menace that
They
sometimes...
were very, very eccentric, as they were as people. Do you know, they had turned down, for Peter Hall, who directed it, the first English production of Waiting for Godot.
Both of them.
And I think regretted that mistake so much that when he came about 20 years later and said, well, here's another interesting play you might like to do together, they both said, yes, immediately, which is a link between what we're doing.
You said that No Man's Land raised more questions for the audience than they were prepared to answer, and that this was one of your reservations about it. Has Patrick helped you to answer
Has he
some
answered
of
all
the,
those questions
yes,
for you?
Have you shared an interpretation where you can...
I think the play is crystal clear. I have no problems with understanding the plot, as it were, the story, which we needn't go into. But perhaps that's a virtue of this production, that it is perfectly clear, I think, what's going on. The two men have a drink in a pub in northern London and become friends as one of them takes the other one home, and I begin to see what's going on in this menage a trois that he disastrously lives in, and I try and rescue him from it at the same time as inveigle my way into it. That seems to me what's going on. But the effect on the audience and on us in rehearsal is something much more mysterious than that. And it comes out of the elegance of the language and Pinter's wit. A lot of this play, I think, may have been written when he was
Oh, really?
drunk.
Yeah, well,
I don't. It's so convincing, the drunken mind meanderings of.
That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, the alcoholism fuels so much of these characters, and Pinter was a big drinker back in the day.
Drinking. I also had a slight worry that perhaps for America it might be too English a play. You couldn't say that of Waiting for Godot, which is absolutely universal, but was this too much about English class and the references to cricket and so on? Hilariously funny for Brits. Would they be picked up and relished by a Broadway audience?
But English class...
I was a fool because Broadway
Is that
audiences
working? Are they laughing at the
sophisticated as
cricket
any-
references? And
Yes, they understand that it's humorous, and this is largely the way this dialogue is being handled by Ian, without perhaps knowing the exact detail of it. But that's the brilliance of this writing in both plays, that often it's simply about rhythm of language, which can trigger a reaction from the audience.
give us a sense now, Sean. You're directing two of the world's greatest actors. How do you handle these guys? I mean, how do you whip them into shape?
Sometimes very delicately, sometimes very sternly. Well, we're all quite close now. You know, it's great, the fact that we did Godot together. You get to know one another, and there's an intimacy between us. And it's like in any situation when you're very close, you have to sort of suss out what the mood is and when you can push a little harder to get a little more. I mean, we concentrate on the plays, you know. All I want them to be is the very, 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 very best they can be in these plays. And they're both completely wonderful actors, and mining the text with them and their absolute interest in not stopping, in going further, looking for more and getting more, makes my job that much easier. If they were like resistant and said, well, that's enough now, I won't take any more notes, well, be end of story. But I don't think I'd be with them if they were like that. They're both absolutely hungry to be better. It's thrilling.
You've talked about the rhythm, and I was so impressed in both plays with how you play off of each other's rhythm so beautifully.
Que voulez-vous? I beg your pardon? Que voulez-vous? Ah! Que voulez-vous? Exactly.
How much do you work on that, and how do you work on that?
There's a lot about the characters that suggested to the three of us that Dee Dee and Gogo, in a former life, because the past is often referenced in the play, and they've known each other for 50 years. They're not lovers, but they are colleagues and friends, and so familiar with each other. We thought the possibility that they'd worked together in a very close relationship was perhaps the case, and as we're theatre people, we thought perhaps they too had been theatre people, and they had been a double act couple on stage like Laurel and Hardy and many others. This is not a new idea with the play. And
Well, we know that Beckett loved the great silent film
and
comedian.
insisted they wear bowler hats, which is reference back to the acts like that. But the point about stand-up comics is that they are absolute. It's a marriage of words. They know exactly their own rhythms. And they can jazz together, and that's what these two characters do, sometimes intentionally and sometimes because they simply can't help it.
I think the balance that you were talking about is probably to do with the fact that you've got two absolutely wonderful actors who've worked together so finely and so closely. I mean, when I read the play many years ago, I couldn't discern the differences on the page between the two characters. It's a very hard play to fathom when you first read it, especially to a younger mind. And it probably would have been disastrous if I had directed it when I first wanted to, when I was barely 30. I think, you know, it's with time that, as my own life has grown and I've aged, as it were, that you know, I've learned how to be able to direct it.
I think there's another thing, if I may,
No, please, yeah.
about the rhythm of both these plays, because they have music in the language. I think that's helped by our backgrounds, which are shared and are common, and that is many years of working with blank verse, where again an instinct for the rhythm and a feeling for it is absolutely essential. A few days ago, someone sent me a little video of Ian analyzing Macbeth's great Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow speech. And several decades ago, this was filmed. And Ian talks about the character, but also talks about the essential rhythmic nature of that speech and how it informs the emotion and the mood. Well, we both come from that same tradition. And I think that's helped us a lot in some of those sections of both plays where rhythm is almost everything.
Since these plays are so tightly constructed and the rhythm's important, do you ever find yourself sort of off the rhythm, off the beat, if you will, at some point? And when you find yourself there, how do you get back on the right tempo?
Well, fortunately, there are two of us, and we're not monologuists. We are a duo, and so I think we've been at it so long as a partnership now on stage that we don't really fall out of rhythm, and we cling on to each other.
You were laughing, though. Have you seen?
Well, I was laughing because not only have they got to, the rhythms of Beckett are so complex and extraordinary, and they've got to crack that. They've then got to go and hang up their Beckett frocks, turn around, put on their Pinter frocks, get on stage and do his rhythms. So it's quite a challenge, you know, to that.
Well, Patrick, before we started taping, you said that it's hard when you stop the one play and then go to the next to get rid of the residue of the first play.
I feel elements of the character and certainly of the language infiltrating into the second play of the day. And I found it helpful. I found it elevating. It lifts and energizes me, feeling that in. But beyond that, I don't know how to analyze it more.
And for me, it's like suddenly being in a magic house where you're in one sort of room, and then you walk through a door and you're in another one. And I don't know. It's a wonderfully exciting and not unsettling experience.
And they're both about death and dementia, we may say, and futility. But I wanted to ask you this. Do you find any optimism in them?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I'm asking them, but
No, but no, I think.
Yes, we
yes,
do.
but tell, because people know these plays as being sort of down plays, but I want you to speak to our viewers about what's so up and optimistic about them, besides the fact that you are there.
For many people in life, getting through the day, getting through the afternoon, or the next hour, or the next minute is a challenge. All of us have experienced this at some time or other. And I find in both these plays that at the end, these guys are going on. We have not come, no, we talk about suicide. We talk about hanging ourselves and waiting for Godot twice, but they never do. They are going on, and the urge to hold on, to hang in, is so powerful a presence in both these plays for me.
I also think these plays are about friendship, which has its optimistic nature too. That as bleak as it may be, if you're two people who love each other, and they do in both of these plays in their way, that connection is life.
Dependability, yes.
Yeah.
So many plays are about basically one character. King Lear. Wonderful parts around him, but King Lear, that everything depends on that. And that's one of the reasons that we don't get to work together very often, because there aren't many plays that are about two characters of equal status. And these are two examples of plays which absolutely depend on the dependability of the two characters getting on. And in the Beckett particularly, another double act, as it were, another duo, Pozzo and Lucky, who arrive out of nowhere and take over the stage. Absolutely, we have to make way for them and then decide, are we going to join in? Are we going to become a quartet? Go thinks, I think perhaps I might become a trio and leave Dee alone, but then he gets drawn back. So relationships in both plays, crucial, and you can't get through life without other people, I think would easily be the message of both plays.
I think that's true. We only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask you all, since it is the 50th anniversary of the great National Theatre, and you've had a connection to the National, have you? Or?
Indeed, Judi Dench sang in the
Of course,
Clowns
that's
from
right,
my
that's
production of Little Night Music at the Gala.
I just wanted to get a sense from each of you what it was like when you first went to work for the National Theatre as an actor or as a director. Who was there? What it was like to walk into this great building and know, in some ways, you've
Well,
arrived.
I should start because I think I got there first.
Yeah.
I worked at the National Theatre when it was at the Old Vic Theatre.
Right, yeah.
Before they had the custom-built premises on the South Bank.
Were you under Olivier? Was he?
And he was my employer. I didn't work, alas, with him. I worked for him. But with Maggie Smith and her then husband, Robert Stevens, and Joan Plowright, Lady Olivier, and many other actors. Practically every actor, with the exception of Patrick, of my generation, went through that company for Olivier. I mean, Anthony Hopkins, Derek Jacobi, Mike Gambon were all there. And it just felt to be the centre of our world, and was, in a sense.
I'm reading Michael Blakemore's wonderful book, Stage Blood. I don't know if you've come across it, but there was a sense of a lot of intrigue always at this theatre. You know, Olivier's deposed by Peter Hall. Were you ever aware of that stuff going on?
You can forget that, because that happens in any organisation. Of course, there's a hierarchy which is challenged, but you know, for the audiences, and that's why theatres exist, there was such richness. And one of the riches was the first production of No Man's Land, which happened there. And then things changed, and other directors came in, and you worked for them.
And when did you arrive at the National? 80s, was it?
Yes, in 1985. I've only worked at the National once.
Oh. You were an RRC guy, right? Was that
I was largely, yes. Peter Hall employed me at the Royal Shakespeare Company in 1966, and the following year he resigned.
Right.
Peter Hall employed me at the National Theatre in 1985, and the following year resigned. So I lost my hook in both theatres. So I hung on in the RSC. I love going to the National Theatre. It is the most exciting place in London for live theatre. And I hope that we now have a new artistic director about to take over.
Rufus Norris, yeah.
Yes, fine director. I hope that I'll be adding to my presently rather modest total of one appearance.
And who was running it when you walked into
Richard Eyre. I mean,
yeah.
two of the biggest influences of my Caribbean, Richard Eyre and Jerry Schoenfeld. And we took a revival of a play that Ian debuted, Bent.
Oh yeah.
We took the first revival of it ever. We did it for Stonewall. We did it as a fundraiser to
One night only.
one night only to raise money for Stonewall, which was the gay awareness activist group. I won't go into the history of Section 28 or a number of things that had happened in England. And from that one night only, we were invited to the National. But then I went on to do, I did Vanya with Ian and Tony Sher and Janet McTeer.
Oh, I saw that.
Les Parents Terribles, which Jerry brought
Of course.
Broadway as Indiscretions.
With Eileen Atkins.
Eileen and Kathleen Turner, Jude Law, first thing Jude did, Cynthia Nixon. But I also did Little Night Music there, which was so successful it ran in the end in the repertoire for over a year and broke at that time all the box office records of the National Theatre. And so Richard Eyre was a wonderful impression.
I read I love the diaries that you British theatre people keep because they settle scores and they reveal all things. And as I asked you about the intrigue around Olivia, I remember reading Richard Eyre's diaries, and he talks about battling Great Depression at the same time he's running this major institution. Yes. Are these things that you were aware of?
Well, you were aware because Richard was quite maybe moody's too strong a word, but a sort of private person, and the rumour always was that if he got bad reviews, he was absolutely so depressed.
Couldn't come into work.
Couldn't come into work. But as an impresario, to work for as a producer, he was the absolute best, the tip-top. He'd come to the run-throughs, give you such positive notes, and then all through previews would guide you. I mean, for young directors myself, Declan Donnellan was there, Sam Mendes was there, Deborah Warner was there, Stephen Daldry was there. It was an absolutely thrilling time. When we did Vanya in the Cottesloe, the other play in the repertoire was Declan Donnellan's Angels in America, his production of Angels in America. That theatre at that time, between Vanya and Angels in America, was the hotspot of London. So it was a thrilling time because one's own talent was growing and being encouraged, and it was very exciting for you. But everyone around you was so talented.
And you can't say it too often in this country, with deep respect, because there's nowhere more exciting for an actor to play than on Broadway. I really mean that.
Many English actors have told us that.
Really mean that.
Sound
however,
you hear from a Broadway.
However, if you're going to try and earn a living and live at home, and you're British, National Theatre is where you want to be, and really America could afford a national theatre, couldn't they? It wouldn't necessarily be what we've got, and probably would be a touring theatre, but the idea of public money going to provide a resource for visitors to the country as well as the natives is a very appealing one.
Sorry to interrupt. You have to leave now, or we could get into a whole thing about the politics of America and how they can't even afford to give their children lunches.
But just want to end up...
Invite us back and we will get it.
But I would say that I do think the National Theatre actually has become a very important part of our landscape here in America, because so many great productions are coming from there and coming here, that the divide between America or New York and London is almost gone as far as I'm concerned.
If I may make a point that's been made by Sean very effectively, what we are doing now on commercial Broadway is a little microcosm of what the National Theatre would do. Where would you go to see Harold Pinter and Beckett in repertory with the same company of actors?
On the same day?
On the same day. You'd almost certainly have to get on a plane and fly to the National Theatre in London, to the South Bank. Well, we've brought that same world into commercial Broadway, and I think we feel not smug, but a little pleased with us.
Bravo, yes, bravo.
And because we felt this right from the word go when Sean initiated everything, that we didn't want to be a British company arriving. We wanted to be working with locals.
Absolutely.
It's an American production because No Man's Land originated here. We did do Godot in England, yes, but not with these two new American actors. And Ian and Patrick were very, very keen that the other actors would be American.
Have we mentioned Billy Crudup?
You have not.
We have not.
Oh, well, we should
Schuler Hensley.
A sensational lucky, and Schuler, to be on stage with Schuler is like being on stage with a tornado, and it's
Schuler, I believe, also was a product of the National Theatre, if I'm not mistaken, because he
Yes.
was in Oklahoma
That's where I
with
first
Hugh
heard.
Jackman.
It brought him to a Tony Award via the National Theatre. But it
tell you.
really is a quartet. I mean, I know
Oh,
Ian
yes.
and Patrick
We are an
are
ensemble.
It's an absolute quartet. It's a true ensemble.
Well, don't miss it. In repertory at the Cort Theatre, No Man's Land, great Harold Pinter play, and Waiting for Godot, Samuel Beckett. I would imagine that the best way to experience them is to do them in one day. That way you have the immersive experience.
That's what I would do as an audience, yeah.
Yeah.
And you can get very cheap tickets, day tickets for any performance. $30, you can sit on the front row of these plays.
Wonderful. Patrick Stewart.
Sir Patrick Stewart.
Sir Ian McKellen. Yes.
And plain old.
Plain old Sean Mathias.
Plain not so old.
Thanks a lot for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Say you are, even if it's not true.
Oh, well, what am I to say?
Say, I am happy.
I am happy.
So am I.
So am I.
We are happy.
We are happy. What do we do now that we're happy?
We wait for Godot.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theatre Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theatre Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theatre Talk. Thank you and good night.